Welcome to a new lab discovery video. Today, we will travel to some of the world's most dangerous borders, where tension and conflict are part of daily life. From the demilitarized zone in Korea to the violence-ridden mountains between Afghanistan and Pakistan, we will explore places where crossing a border can mean the difference between life and death. And the last border we'll see has the potential to trigger a third world war. Join us on this journey through some of the planet's most tense spots. Border number 1, the North Korea-South Korea border, the demilitarized zone. We begin with the most militarized border on the planet, the demilitarized zone, DMZ, between North and South Korea. Despite its name, this area is one of the most fortified in the world, filled with landmines, constant surveillance, and thousands of armed troops on both sides. The tension here is palpable, and any mistake could ignite an international tragedy. Since the end of the Korean War in 1953, the North and South have remained in a tense truce. No official peace treaty has been signed, which means that technically, both countries are still at war. The DMZ, stretching about 250 kilometers long and 4 kilometers wide, acts as a strip of land dividing the two Koreas. However, within this peace zone, heavily armed soldiers are ready to respond to any provocation. Over the years, several incidents at this border have claimed lives. In 1976, the infamous Axe incident occurred when North Korean soldiers attacked and killed 2 U.S. officers who were trying to cut down a tree within the DMZ. This event brought both countries to the brink of war once again. Today, while there are occasional attempts at dialogue, the tension remains high. The risk of conflict is ever present, and crossing this border without authorization is almost certain death. Border number 2, the India-Pakistan border, Kashmir. Kashmir, one of the most disputed regions in the world, has been the center of conflict between India and Pakistan for over 70 years. The region is divided between the two countries, but both claim it in its entirety, sparking wars, armed clashes, and ongoing tensions. After the partition of the Indian subcontinent in 1947, Kashmir became a flashpoint. Since then, India and Pakistan have fought 3 wars, 2 of which centered around Kashmir. Today, this border is one of the most militarized in the world, with over 500,000 soldiers deployed on the Indian side alone. Clashes along the line of control, the de facto border between India and Pakistan and Kashmir, are frequent. In 2019, a suicide attack in Indian-controlled Kashmir, attributed to a militant group based in Pakistan, led to an aerial confrontation between the two countries, bringing the world to the edge of nuclear war. But it's not just the soldiers who suffer at this border. The civilians of Kashmir live in constant fear. Curfews, clashes between security forces and insurgents, and human rights abuses are part of daily life. For those living in this region, crossing the border is impossible, and many feel trapped in a never-ending conflict. Border number 3, the United States-Mexico border. The border between the United States and Mexico is one of the busiest in the world but also one of the most dangerous. Stretching over 3,000 kilometers, this border not only separates two countries but two vastly different realities. In recent years, violence at the border has escalated dramatically due to drug cartel activity, human trafficking, and conflicts between migrants and security forces. Mexican border cities like Ciudad Juarez and Tijuana are known for their high levels of violence. Every year, thousands of people try to cross this border in search of a better life, but many face deadly dangers. Harsh desert conditions, violence from traffickers, and strict immigration policies make crossing this border an extremely risky gamble. Over the years, the border has been a central issue in U.S. politics, with measures like the construction of walls and physical barriers aimed at curbing illegal immigration. However, the violence and suffering along this border continue to affect thousands of people each year. Border number 4, the Syria-Turkey border. The Syrian civil war has turned the border with Turkey into one of the world's most dangerous areas. This region has become the epicenter of the struggle between the Syrian government, rebel groups, Turkish forces, and Kurdish militants. Since 2011, the conflict in Syria has displaced millions of people, many of whom have attempted to cross the border into Turkey to escape the violence. Turkey has responded with military operations in northern Syria to contain extremist groups, further exacerbating the situation. The border is heavily militarized, and clashes are frequent. Bombings and mortar attacks have claimed thousands of lives in this region. The humanitarian situation is dire, with millions of refugees living in camps along the border. Despite international efforts to end the conflict, the violence shows no signs of stopping, leaving civilians in a seemingly hopeless situation. Border number 5, the Colombia-Venezuela border. The political and economic crisis in Venezuela has triggered a massive wave of migration into Colombia. Every day, thousands of Venezuelans cross the border seeking a better life, but the journey is extremely dangerous. Armed groups and drug traffickers control large parts of the border, extorting and exploiting migrants. Violence in this region has increased significantly in recent years, with frequent clashes between security forces and illegal groups. For many Venezuelan families, crossing the border is a life-or-death decision. They face not only violence but also a lack of food, medicine, and basic services. Colombia has welcomed more than 1 million migrants in recent years, but the situation remains critical. International organizations have warned of the severity of the crisis at this border, but finding a lasting solution remains a monumental challenge. Border number 6, the Sudan-South Sudan border. After South Sudan's independence in 2011, tensions between the two countries continue along the border, especially in the oil-rich Abyei region. This area has been a constant point of conflict, with clashes between Sudanese forces and South Sudanese troops. Territorial disputes have claimed thousands of lives and displaced hundreds of thousands more. Despite peace agreements, violence erupts periodically, and civilians are often caught in the crossfire. The border remains unstable, and the struggle for control of natural resources, such as oil, has further complicated the situation. Armed clashes between local tribes and military forces are common, making the border an extremely dangerous place. Border number 7, the Afghanistan-Pakistan border, the Durand Line. The border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, known as the Durand Line, is one of the world's most dangerous regions. This mountainous area has long been a haven for militants, including the Taliban and other extremist groups. Drone strikes, bombings, and clashes between Pakistani military forces and militants are constant. The instability in Afghanistan, especially after the withdrawal of international forces in 2021, has increased violence along this border. For civilians living in this region, life is extremely perilous. Many villages have been destroyed by fighting, and thousands have been displaced from their homes. Additionally, the area is riddled with landmines, which continue to cause casualties years after being planted. The lack of security makes this border virtually impassable for most people. Border number 8, the Israel-Palestine border, Gaza Strip. Particularly in the Gaza Strip, this is one of the most explosive and dangerous borders in the world. This small but densely populated territory, with nearly 2 million inhabitants, has been the scene of one of the longest and bloodiest conflicts in recent history. Since Hamas took control of Gaza in 2007, Israel has imposed a strict blockade, arguing that it is necessary to protect itself from rocket attacks and the threat of terrorist groups. This blockade has strangled Gaza's economy, creating poverty, desperation, and fueling a cycle of constant violence. Every few years, Gaza and nearby Israeli cities witness intense military offensives, leaving thousands dead and wounded. Israel's airstrikes, in response to rockets fired from Gaza, caused massive devastation, destroyed buildings, displaced families, and collapsed infrastructure. Civilians are caught in the middle, suffering the gravest consequences of each escalation. One of the most significant events occurred in 2018 with the Great March of Return. Thousands of Palestinians protested near the border, demanding the right to return to their ancestral lands. What began as a peaceful movement quickly turned into a bloody confrontation, with hundreds of Palestinians killed by Israeli forces. Life in Gaza is precarious and marked by uncertainty. Inhabitants live under the constant threat of bombings, with limited access to basic resources such as electricity, water, and medical care. Living conditions are dire, and tensions between Gaza and Israel show no signs of abating. What makes this border especially dangerous is the fact that any minor incident has the potential to spark a larger conflict. The confrontations between Israel and Gaza not only devastate those involved but also have the potential to destabilize the entire region. Tensions in this area pose a threat not only to locals but to peace throughout the Middle East. Every new conflict could draw in external actors and trigger an international crisis with unpredictable repercussions. Recently, the increase in attacks and retaliations along this border has raised global concern, with foreign powers taking sides and threatening to intervene. This could spark a large-scale war with global implications. Despite international efforts to mediate the conflict, temporary ceasefires are fragile, and tensions persist. The possibility of another tragedy is always looming, and peace in this region remains an increasingly distant goal. And with that, we conclude our tour of the world's most dangerous borders. Now we want to hear from you. Which do you think is the most dangerous border, and why? Leave your comments below, and remember to subscribe for more lab discovery content. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next video.